Sometimes animals have to eat themselves, and it's not always because of hunger. Sometimes it goes too far, and sometimes it's the evolutionary thing. However, certain creatures, such as this unfortunate bird, simply have exceptionally bad luck. Yes, the snake has lost its head, but it still keeps moving. It even bites itself. Actually, when a snake's head is severed, it can still be dangerous because of the way snakes' bodies work. Snakes are cold-blooded creatures, meaning they get their heat from external sources such as sunlight and warm surfaces. So they don't need a lot of energy to maintain their temperature, which means they don't need a lot of oxygen to feed their brains. So a snake's head can exist separately for a few minutes or even hours. Most likely, snakes don't even realize that they no longer have a body and bite whatever they come across. And this poor raccoon is trapped and, yeah, he's eaten himself. I know it sounds horrible and it looks ugly too. Besides the trap, it's our natural instincts at fault here. When a wild animal is desperate to break free and stay alive, it becomes so determined that it's even willing to harm itself. However, we'll talk about that a bit later. This python is so huge because it ate a porcupine. It's also dead for the same reason. This is why most adult, experienced animals rarely hunt porcupines. They're difficult to kill because of the large number of quills that easily detach and stick into predators deep enough that it hurts to pull them out. Also, porcupines are not easily scared and don't run away even when they see large opponents. But even if someone miraculously takes down a porcupine without getting hurt, it still needs to eat it somehow. The python wasn't up to the challenge. And the spiders eat their own legs. It sounds weird, but we found a lot of eyewitness accounts on Reddit. People caught spiders and then suddenly found them eating their limbs. We also came across a couple of articles on the subject. Most likely, this is some kind of defense strategy. And spiders don't eat their legs in the literal sense, but sort of suck them out, because that's how spiders eat. Anyway, I hope one day the BBC will make a documentary about this. Or at least film a couple of videos. Some videos like this look creepy though. Here's a deer that crosses the road to, well, you get the idea. In fact, the infrastructure of our cities, so convenient for humans, is usually entirely unfit for animals. That's why deer, as well as many other wild animals, are constantly getting run over. This is a really serious issue, and its scale becomes clear if you look at the statistics. Every year in different parts of the world, there can be up to 220,000 car accidents involving deer. Out of these incidents, over 1,000 lead to injuries for people, while roughly 20, unfortunately, result in fatalities. Deer fatalities, on the other hand, are notably higher. At times, it appears that deer tend to dart around in a somewhat random manner, which can unfortunately lead to them getting caught in trees. This situation can have dire consequences even when no roads or vehicles are involved. When it comes to deer, the situation seems quite sad, yet somewhat expected. However, the Falcon incident really caught me off guard. It appeared to be a typical scenario, the owner taking off the hood of their pet falcon ready to let it hunt, yet within a matter of seconds, the falcon unexpectedly collided with a passing truck. It was such a sudden and tragic moment that it genuinely startled me. To put it in perspective, in the United States, somewhere between 49 and 340 million birds meet their unfortunate end each year due to collisions with cars as of 2021. So what went down here? This fragment's from a Danish cooking and hunting show where they aim to hunt and cook various animal species in each episode. In this particular episode, the host traveled to France to hunt partridges. Even though one of the falcon owners hesitated to release his bird near the highway, the other hunters convinced him to do it. That decision turned out to be a big mistake. But who would have thought that a falcon, a seemingly smart bird, would pull off something like this? Anyway, I do feel sorry for the falcon, but let's still get back to the fact that animals eat themselves. Snakes, for example. The notion of a snake biting its own tail has mythical roots. In ancient mythology, a snake that devours or bites its tail is called an Ouroboros, which is Greek for tail devourer. The ancient Greeks were generally pretty good with logic. As a symbol, Ouroboros has a bunch of different meanings, so it was used in religion, magic, alchemy, and even psychology. Not surprisingly, the term Ouroboros eventually made its way into the scientific literature on reptiles as well. Take, for instance, a genus of African lizards that scientists named Ouroboros cataphractus. These critters earned their name by curling up and biting their tails, creating a sort of shielded ball shape. It's a bit like what armadillos do, except these lizards are definitely not armadillos. There's little scientific evidence of snakes biting their tail or trying to eat themselves. Of course, there have been a few cases of snakes nibbling their own tails while in captivity. For example, a female albino western hognose bit off its own tail in the UK in 2014. But that's not what worries scientists. The behavior of snakes in the wild is an entirely different matter. You can often see videos of snakes biting themselves, but the scary thing about all this is that it's often a snake that's been hit by a car or something like that. Biologists say that this behavior is proof that snakes are in excruciating pain. In situations like this, they simply wriggle out and bite anything they can reach. Besides trauma or intense stress, some experts suggest that a snake might bite its own tail if it's hungry and mistakes it for prey. It could also happen when a snake gets confused while trying to attack another snake. It might sound strange, but then again, I'm no snake expert. Though biologists know that when a snake is trying to eat another snake, it can accidentally start swallowing its own tail. This happens because snakes have a very strong feeding response and apparently not a very brilliant brain. That is, the snake sees the food and basically nothing else matters anymore. Of course, this behavior is especially common in snake species that feed on their own species, such as among the king cobras in India. Other snake species don't get confused like that. It's much more simple when it comes to eating skin. Even among humans, there are some who love to tear off their burrs. It's not safe, don't do it. Firstly, you can get an infection, and secondly, none of us are lizards. Yes, some lizards and frogs eat the skin they shed, and this process even has a name: dermatophagy. Insects do that too. For example, Madagascar hissing cockroaches chow down on their old exoskeletons. There are two reasons for this behavior. First, this habit allows them to hide the evidence of their existence. If you eat the skin, its odor will not attract predators and prevent them from tracking you down. The second reason is to conserve energy. Even a dry, lifeless piece of skin contains nutrients, and the animal has spent effort, time, and energy to create that skin, and then it took a lot of energy to shed it. Eating it's a desperate attempt to salvage at least a small amount of the wasted resources. Sometimes animals like geckos start eating their skin while it's still on their bodies. It looks super creepy, like a gecko eating itself. However, it also serves a purpose. The gecko's just multitasking. The faster it sheds its skin and eats it, the faster it stops being vulnerable, and the less time it spends in one place. So geckos combine two important tasks and scare those who happen to witness the process. This photo of a tiger was taken a couple of years ago in Thailand. We can't say for sure what happened to its hind paw, but it's quite likely that a trap was the reason behind its disappearance. This video was captured back in 2015 at Murchison Falls National Park. The lion you see here got caught in a trap set by poachers. But it's not just about the traps and snares. When animals get ensnared, they desperately struggle to break free, just like that raccoon you saw earlier. And in their fight for freedom, they sometimes end up gnawing off their own limbs. In 2016 in China, they found a female bear caught in a trap. When they got closer, they were shocked. The female bear was gnawing on her own paw, the very one that had been caught in the trap. If the bear had succeeded, she would have escaped the trap. But at what cost?
Everything.
Don't worry, let's make it clear from the start. They helped the bear, rescued it, and provided the necessary care. Unfortunately, they had to amputate its paw. But the good news is the bear's still alive and will be living safely in a dedicated center from now on. The bear's actions, while trapped, may seem unsettling, but they're crucial for its survival. When stuck in a trap, being immobile means certain death due to dehydration and starvation. There's no way around it. However, if the bear can roam freely despite missing some limbs, it stands a pretty good chance at surviving. Sure, it's a tougher life compared to having a full set of limbs, but it beats a guaranteed death sentence. After all, there are numerous instances of wild animals thriving even when they're missing one or more of their limbs. So the bear chose an option that would help her survive. And she's not alone. Many predatory animals such as wolves, coyotes, even cougars and raccoons do the same thing to escape a hunting trap. It's worth noting that the instances mentioned don't qualify as autocannibalism. In these cases, the animals gnawed off their own limbs but didn't actually consume them. Instead, they abandoned the severed limbs in the traps and quickly fled from the dangerous area. Some animals resort to eating their own limbs when they're really hungry. Spiders are still a bit of a mystery in this regard, but we do know that mantises occasionally pull this stunt when they're feeling hungry. It may look pretty gruesome, but there's some sound logic behind it. Think about it like this. When a hungry mantis chops on its own legs, it's basically a survival tactic. From an evolutionary standpoint, it's better to have offspring than to have all limbs. Plus, the good news is that those missing legs will grow back after the next molt. The mantises have an amazing regeneration. However, it's a delicate balance because if it gobbles up too much, it might not make it to the next molt. And by the way, since we're talking about insects, I just have to say a few words about butterflies. Even children know how their life cycle goes. A caterpillar hatches from an egg, then eats leaves, wraps itself in a cocoon, and then emerges as a beautiful butterfly. We take it for granted. It's something almost magical, yet ordinary. But do you know how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly? What exactly happens inside the cocoon? Oh, not everyone's ready to find this out. So after the molting and growth cycle is complete, the caterpillar usually stops eating and finds shelter from the bad weather. It hangs upside down and covers its body with silk that it's created. So far, everything's clear and familiar. But once the cocoon is ready, the process gets crazy and disgusting at the same time. The caterpillar doesn't just turn into a butterfly or moth with the help of some magic. It takes much more than that. The caterpillar begins to digest itself. That's right, it releases enzymes that begin to liquefy almost the entire caterpillar. If you open the cocoon at this stage, a liquid cocktail will ooze out instead of the insect.
Gonna have a hell of a meal.
However, within this caterpillar ooze, there are tiny secret structures. When the caterpillar emerges from the egg, it has special groups of cells called imaginal discs. In the caterpillar stage, these discs do nothing because the caterpillar produces a chemical that prevents the cells from multiplying and growing. These cells are not broken down even when the caterpillar turns to ooze. Moreover, the imaginal discs begin to multiply and grow, and very quickly. They use the ooze that used to be the caterpillar as food to reproduce and grow. There's a disc to make the wings, a disc to make the legs, a disc to make the antenna, and so forth. Everything you need to assemble a whole insect. In some cases, the imaginal discs grow from 50 tiny cells to over 50,000 in a short period of time. And then, at the end of this totally crazy process, a butterfly or moth emerges from the cocoon. By the way, a small study revealed that butterflies and moths may remember something from the time when they were caterpillars, but there's not enough data yet to draw definite conclusions. And then I thought, if small lizards can discard their tails and then not only live normally, but also grow them back, what about larger reptiles? Can a Komodo dragon pull off such a trick? Computer modeling suggests that the Komodo dragon's bite force is relatively small. It reaches 39 newtons tops compared to 252 newtons for an Australian saltwater crocodile of the same size. However, the Komodo dragon's powerful neck and razor-sharp teeth are perfect for a slashing attack. With all this in mind, I think the Komodo dragon could rip off its own tail quite easily if it wanted to. The question is, why would it want to do that in the first place? Domestic Komodo dragons, for example, have been repeatedly seen biting off their own tails. Why? No one knows. They just do it, and that's it. It can also happen when the tail becomes a liability. For example, when the lizard is attacked by a large predator like a crocodile, if a bone is damaged in the attack, the tail will get in the way and it's easier to tear it off than to drag it around and risk getting infection. Perhaps after tearing off the tail, the Komodo dragon will even eat it so as not to waste precious nutrients. But of course we can't check this, so far such cases have not been observed. However, if we approach the question from the point of view of theory, the Komodo dragon actually does not have very many chances to survive without a tail. Agabid lizards, Komodo dragons, and chameleons typically don't regrow their tails when they're injured or severed, so if a Komodo dragon loses its tail, it won't be able to grow it back. Unless it succumbs to blood loss or infection, it'll likely have a tough time competing with healthy Komodo dragons sporting their tails. The result is pretty obvious. At the same time, a lot of lizard species are capable of losing part of their tail to escape a predator. The discarded part of the tail falls to the ground where it continues to wriggle like a living thing, distracting the predator from the lizard's vulnerable body. Sometimes the predator stays distracted for as long as 5 minutes. That's long enough to let the lizard escape. Well, the predator will continue to hold or try to catch the tail that's come off. In short, everyone plays a role. Since lizard tails are often used to store fat, they provide the predator with some energy, and this can help the lizard. The logic behind this is simple. A well-fed predator won't go looking for the lizard to kill and eat it, but at the same time, the same tail may well benefit the lizard itself, even if it's been dropped. Some lizards, such as skinks, are known to eat their own tails to consume the energy stored in them, unless a predator eats it first. Some types of lizards can willingly shed their tails even with just a little nudge. To put it simply, the tail doesn't get torn off, it pretty much drops off by itself. This happens when lizards flex the muscles near the base of their tail, which in turn snaps the vertebra. However, most of the time, tail loss happens when a hungry predator grabs it and snaps it. Occasionally, a lizard might swim around with a damaged or partly broken tail until it eventually tears away. It's hard to say for sure if the lizard's deliberately trying to ditch its tail, but that's often how it appears. Although we've heard about reptiles like geckos and iguanas being able to grow back their tails, no one had ever seen American alligators do this, until recently. The study showed that young alligators can grow back about 9 inches of their lost tails. Interestingly, they're the largest animals known to have this regenerative ability. What's even more impressive is the amount of tissue they can regrow is among the highest in the animal kingdom. However, the regenerated tails aren't quite as good as the originals. As they lack skeletal muscle tissue, it's a bit peculiar because even lizards and some mammals can regrow this type of muscle. But maybe alligators conserve energy by skipping the muscle regeneration step, which can be quite energy intensive. Although alligators have a stronger physique than most other reptiles, they are vulnerable at a young age. They're on the menu of virtually every predator in existence, including birds, raccoons, and even other alligators. So the ability to shed a tail and then grow it back could help an alligator in a big way. It's not clear if adults can do the same thing. They probably can, but so far scientists have not confirmed this. So if lizards can grow back their tails, and alligators, which are also lizards, can do it too, could dinosaurs, those gigantic ancient lizards, have pulled off the same trick? Maybe some of them did. Even though the ancestors of dinosaurs, alligators, and birds split up around 250 million years ago, dinosaurs and alligators are still pretty close relatives. It's a shame that we haven't come across any dino fossils showing signs of tail regrowth yet, but it's possible that scientists just haven't stumbled upon them. Scientists do not exclude this possibility, although they say that it'll be difficult to know for sure. When the tail grows back, the bones of the spine are replaced by a cartilage tube in the regenerated part of the skeleton, and cartilage, unlike bone, cannot stay underground for millions of years waiting to be discovered by archaeologists. So when scientists find a skeleton without a tail, they can't say with certainty whether the bones just got lost somewhere or whether this dinosaur shed it and then grew it back. Maybe even a few times. Biting itself. Can a snake bite and kill itself with its own venom? Scientists have found out that it's virtually impossible. If a venomous snake bites itself, for example as an accident, antibodies suppress any venom injected into the bloodstream. Snakes have evolved so that they can bite themselves on the tail but cannot kill themselves with their venom. Apparently there were precedents, so evolution had to take some precautions. Keep in mind that a stressed snake is unlikely to bite itself in a manner that would result in venom injection, because snakes are well aware that their venom basically doesn't work against their own species. That's why you might notice snake fights often seem quite comical. These reptiles are savvy with their venom and prefer not to waste it on enemies that won't be affected, so they don't use their fangs entirely when settling disputes. Instead, they coil around and shove against each other. Scorpions and fire. Legend has it that when in peril, such as a scorpion caught amidst a fire, it stings itself to spare unnecessary agony. This myth is rooted in genuine observations, yet, as is often the case, people misunderstood what was really happening. Recently, scientists have shed light on the matter. Scorpions are a type of animal called poikilothermic, meaning they have variable temperatures. That means they can't regulate their temperature, so they depend on the temperature of their environment. This is why, if they're surrounded by fire, their body heats up and quickly dehydrates, which provokes frantic spasms and contractions of the tail. It seems as if the scorpion is jabbing itself, but it's more like a final involuntary twitch. I can't decide which one sounds worse. Stressed macaques. Injurious self-biting is one of the most serious problems in primate colonies. Approximately 10% of captive monkeys suffer from the disturbing phenomenon of self-injurious behavior. Among rhesus macaques, the ones most commonly found in labs, self-biting may be as high as 14%. They can start doing it for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's out of boredom, but more often it's emotional distress. For example, if the cage was moved or separated from a partner, or there were some other changes that the animal has a hard time dealing with. Your brain is eating itself. A new study has found that chronic sleep deprivation can cause the brain to eat itself. That's because the cells that digest so-called cellular debris are working harder. We all know that getting a good night's sleep is essential for our brains to work properly. If you've ever stayed up too late, you've probably realized it leads to, well, forgetfulness at least. When we sleep, our brains do housekeeping, getting rid of waste and toxins that build up during the day. But when we don't get enough sleep, this cleaning process gets disrupted. In simple terms, it's like some brain cells start snacking on the links between our brain cells. This makes us more vulnerable to conditions like strokes and Alzheimer's. So just try to go to sleep earlier today. Scientific self-cannibalism. Do you know all the Nobel Prize winners? Meanwhile, a few years back, a Japanese scientist named Yoshinori Osumi received the prestigious Nobel Prize in the field of physiology and medicine. His groundbreaking work focused on understanding a fascinating process called autophagy, when an organism essentially eats parts of itself to stay healthy. It might sound a bit like the way lizards or praying mantises behave, but in reality, this process is crucial for our own bodies. Without autophagy, our bodies wouldn't be able to break down and recycle old, worn-out, or diseased cellular components. Even though we're alive, our bodies are constantly going through a natural process of breaking down, kind of like self-cannibalism. At the same time, our bodies also have periods of renewal and growth. Think of it as our body's way of tidying up, getting rid of old junk and making space for fresh new cells. Osumi was studying these processes, so if you want to dive deeper, you can look up his research. See you later.